Hey, what's up YouTube? So today I'm doing jamb extensions for either an interior door, exterior door, windows. If your wall is greater than 4.5 inches, a standard 2x4 wall, like on this is remodel, plaster and lath. So this wall is I need about an inch of a jamb extension. And I ripped this one down, straight edge. You could freehand it on a table saw, but I just use a straight edge with my circular saw. What you do is measure your projections to the flush with the drywall, both top and bottom. You could snap the line, use a straight edge, or you can hold up your jamb, get it flush, and scribe the back side with your pencil, and then freehand it on your table saw. Side jambs, you know, you get top, bottom, middle. Up here, you can take your speed square, throw it across, and see where you're at on the head jamb on both sides. And I'm at an inch on each side on the top. And then overall for my head jamb, it has to be 32.5. So I'm gonna go cut that and rip it on my table saw, and I'll show you that. Here's the pine jambs I picked up. So they're stained, 3 coats of polish, so they're ready to go. So here's the drop of my first rip on the left side jamb. Obviously, since I already finished mine, I want to take into account and keep this edge for the head jamb. I only need 32.5 inches, so I'm going to cross cut it first. And if you want your jambs absolutely perfect, I wouldn't recommend staining beforehand, because you could take like an electric planer and plane it flush with the drywall the whole way. After you kind of get a rough cut, you could use a block plane. So I get my 32.5. Now I need it in an inch. So since I'm at an inch at the top and an inch and an eighth at the bottom, I'm going to mark it out. So I make my mark. Now, since I'm cutting with the track, I need to figure out my offset. So this is the edge I'm saving. So I want to run my saw the left side of my saw curve. So actually it'll be the right side of my saw curve, which I think it's 1.25 inches, 1 3/16. So from my marks, I need to make a secondary mark at 1 3/16 inches. So I make my secondary mark, and that's where I'll line up my track. So I make my secondary mark. So now I take my straight edge, set it on my mark, get it somewhat close. And if you had a track saw, this would be nice. Like I said, if you're really good on a table saw, you could freehand it. Now, this mark's on, it usually takes some finesse, you know, going top and bottom. And you want to make sure it's good and tight. One thing to be cognizant of, like on a track like this, if you really push your saw into it, you know, it'll flex in the center. So you could either, while you're going, just take your time. Don't push over so much, or you can grab your hand. I like to run a shop vac, because if you get any sawdust up against this fence, obviously that's gonna move your saw blade. So you can check it, start out, see where your blade's at, make sure you're right on. I'm right on. So you can see, using a track like that gives you a really clean cut that'll pair up nice. So obviously, if you have a bunch of saw marks, saw blade curves in there, like if you run it through your table saw, you're gonna have to sand those down if you want a really seamless transition. So I got all my pieces cut. I like to double check them. Now what I'm going to do is take my 18 gauge nailer with 2-inch nails. apply glue to both sides real lightly. So what I'm going to do is test fit all my pieces, make sure they're right on the money. Now what you'll do, I'm going to use some Titebond wood glue, apply it to both sides real lightly, come and nail through the face with my 18 gauge nailer with 2-inch nails. You could also use like trim head screws if you had a real long extension, and countersink them and then fill them. Here, since it's only 1 inch, with glue, I think that'll be plenty. If I decide I need some, I'll countersink some little trim screws. But everything's looking right on. Okay, what I'm gonna do is set my 2 sides and then figure out what the top's gonna be. So I'm using Titebond. And you'll want to keep a wet rag. So the key thing is to line up your head jamb and make sure when you're nailing in to keep your nail straight so it's not going to blow out the jamb. And make sure and apply pressure to be mindful of your fingers. Now if you're doing paint grade, what you can do is offset this like 1/8, and that gives you a nice, you know, little reveal to lay a bead of caulking in before you paint. Here I'm going to take a fill stick or some wood filler and then come back and hit it with some stain. That's what I'm trying to get, just a little bit out of that groove so I have room for wood filler. Okay, so that one's done. So you can kind of see what, both of these are pine. I tried to match the grain, but you know, the way pine stains, how it takes up stain is just kind of the nature of the beast. So in that tiny little groove, I'm gonna fill that with wood filler, hit it with stain, and then white poly when I'm all done. So if you shoot through the jamb, like I told you to be careful so you don't, you can peel it back, take your set of nippers, since that nail, and obviously if you waited to stain, you could sand everything, get it very nice, and then come back and stain it. So I got the glue on. So cleaned up the glue. Now I'm going to measure for the top, but I know it's got to be 1 inch thick or wide. So I'm 32 3/4. So now I'm setting my top, applied the glue. So after you get it on, and basically the key when you're doing it is just to go along and push in and flush. Jamb, the one benefit if you would pre-assemble it is you could shoot through or staple through the side jamb into the head jamb, but I cut it tight so it's not going anywhere. But so I'm gonna wipe all the glue up top and then fill the seam. So during the process of this job, I've used this battery powered vacuum, and actually the homeowner bought me one, and this is the handiest thing. I'm just sharing this for doing light stuff like around the house. Like if you're doing trim work, right now I just sanded all this sand before I tape. I want to vacuum all that up with this little shop vac. Runs off a battery, M18. It's got plenty of power for just little things, but it's just so convenient to be able to have it in here without a cord, move it around the house. Love it. I wish I would have bought this a long time ago for doing little things like this. That way you don't have to worry about a cord. It packs up real nice. Everything stores in here. Comes with different attachments. You don't have to look at all the stats. I seen they just made a pack out version. Does come with the HEPA air filter. I love it. I mean, if you're I never thought of something like this until I started using his. But then now it's like, how did I ever get along without it? Just because it's so handy. So, I mean, plenty of power. Light, easy to transport, all self-contained. Obviously, it's not going to replace the shop vac. The hose stretches out real nice. But I thought I'd just share that because this has been absolutely awesome. So, just kind of my review on these little cordless shop vacs. I would say it's a definite buy if you can afford it to your budget. Anyways, I thought I'd throw that little tidbit in there if it helps anybody, if you're kind of deciding on whether it's worth it to buy, what kind of power. I would say I'm kind of surprised at the power due to just being battery, but it's plenty for a little bit of sanding dust, you know, real light stuff. So anyways, that's just my 2 cents there.